Welcome to, that's good. Welcome to my hometown. Hey, I'm IATA. I work in Geneva for many years, but it's always good to come back home. We're going to talk about digital transformation. Digital transformation is something that has evolved dramatically. 10 years ago, the definition was probably different, but now there is a conversion and an acceleration of innovation and technologies and things that are happening. So this is definitely in the agenda of many people. All the companies in the value chain, airlines, airports, ground handlers, caterers, travel agents, GDSs, PSSs, I mean, so many companies. Today, from the moment a passenger decides to travel until he reaches his destination, there is an average of 26 business partners involved. All these partners have heterogeneous, to say the least, technologies, systems, processes. We have things today where you just spend $400 million in buying an aircraft, and your pilot needs to sign with a pencil that the fuel has been charged. You have some of these providers sending faxes. So when you think about it, when an airline arrives or a passenger arrives on time to its destination, it's a miracle. The problem is growth is amazing in our industry. You've seen some of the figures. Every 15 years, we're doubling up the volumes. So we cannot continue sending faxes. We cannot continue doing manual processing, because if not, we will not succeed. So with that thought, we've put together this session. We have two speakers. First, we have a consultant, I'm going to introduce in a second, and then we have a business partner that is helping a number of airlines doing retailing on online and mobile world. And then we'll have a panel to kind of give you what is the art of the possible, what are the opportunities here, and hopefully you'll have some key takeaways for you. So, without further delay, let me introduce Antoine Berthaut. He's a Director, Strategy, Operations, and Business Technology Consulting at PricewaterhouseCoopers. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be here for the first Wings of Change in Europe. But I have to admit that I'm feeling a little bit distraught. I've been here since this morning, and I've heard a number of things around infrastructure problems, congestions, delays. I've heard things around fuel costs going up, margins being eroded. I've heard things about regulations. So I just wanted to start with a positive message. In this day and age of digitalization, there will still be a need for some people to go from point A to point B. So the wonderful news I have for you is that you still have a business. You haven't been decimated yet. With that comes some opportunities, and that's what we're going to focus on today. But we are also going to talk about the challenges. I've been asked to focus my presentation more as a sort of an umbrella presentation for the panel and to focus on business models. So before we move into the details, and this is what you get when you send your slides at the last minute, you get your slides turned upside down. Let's provide a definition of business models. The definition I will use for this presentation essentially boils down to three things. When we speak about business models, we speak about defining value, we speak about delivering that value, and we speak about capturing that value. So what does that mean for you? It first means you need to be able to articulate the value proposition. It's not just about doing it, it's about being able to model financially, narratively, what is the value proposition you're offering. The second element around delivery is about your capabilities. It's all good to have the ideas, but you need to actually execute. And the capabilities have to build on your processes, they have to build on your know-how, they have to build on technology. The third element, which sometimes we forget about, is that you need to capture the value. It's not just about enabling others to get benefits and to have interesting value proposition, but there's a notion of monetizing. And at the end of the day, if you want to have a robust business model, you need all three. You need to be able to articulate your value proposition, you need to be able to deliver it, but you also need to make sure that the cost incurred by that delivery are actually offset by the revenue you are generating. And over the next few minutes, I'm going to take you through a few examples of what type of business models you can get. So, does anybody know that little dog who has kids? No? Okay. This is Spot the dog. That cartoon has been translated in 60 different languages. If you talk about business model innovation, the person who drew that cartoon in the first place grew up during airplanes. And he explained that he was so focused on airplanes and drawing them that he actually crafted his skills, and he ended up being a cartoonist. So if you talk about business model innovation, I think this is a pretty stretch target for airlines to actually become editors of kids' books. More interestingly, in this book, the goal is for kids to really flip the pages and look for the dog. And every page they turn, they can't find the dog. They can't find the dog. And so they move to the next page and they can't find the dog. And I get a little bit of a feeling that when we speak about digital business model innovation, we're a little bit like that. We know there's something there. We are convinced that there's a new world out there and that there are opportunities, but every time we turn the page, it's not actually there, and we need to actually find another way, and we're sort of in search for these digital business models. If you look at where they are actually, the sweet spot, when we typically do brainstorming sessions with clients, these are the three key things we look into. We first look at the value chain, so starting from exploration of the journey and travel, moving to booking, moving to pre-travel, then the actual airport transit, in-flight situation, then arrival, destination, and post-trip. So you have to look at the overall value chain in the first place. The second key element we actually look into, because we want to monetize, because there's an element of capturing value, is to look at the fundamental drivers of shareholder value. And at the end of the day, it comes down to three things. First, revenue, the top line. And here you have to look at the sales of tickets, the type of distribution you can have, but also ancillary services. And you will see that in the discussion later, we talk a lot about ancillary services. The second element of shareholder value boils down to cost, so that's the bottom line. And here you have to look at your fuel cost. I think we talked about that this morning. You have to look at your operating cost as well as your overheads. And then the third element is capital allocation, leasing, buying aircraft, investment in technology, and so forth. But at the end of the day, you have to look for opportunities to create value against these three levels. And then the third element that you want to look into are the actual technology disruptors. And in PwC, we started with a very long list of technology breakthroughs or things that were up and coming in a few years ago. And we really scanned them very thoroughly to look at which ones were the most, let's say, disruptive technologies, which, when taken by themselves or in combination, would actually generate powerful new business models. And we started with 8, or we ended up with 8, and over time, they're slowly creeping up. They relate to artificial intelligence, mobile, data, big data analytics, virtual reality, assisted reality, augmented reality. They also relate to drones, robots, etc. So these are all the things you read in the press pretty much every day. And the interesting things come when you start actually matching those three different axes and sort of brainstorming around, okay, if I take that part of the value chain and I look for this type of technologies in combination, what type of things come up? And what you see is that there are some wonderful things that come up when you actually start this type of discussions. I'm going to take you through a few examples, because we need to put some orders. Looking into different industries and looking at the type of innovations and new business models that our clients were actually producing, we came up with a model which really tries to sort out the situation in terms of, okay, how close are you from the client? What type of insights do you get on these clients? Versus where do you fit in the value chain or in the ecosystem? And the small model you have here, I think, is a powerful way for you to think through where you are, where you want to play, what type of capabilities you need to build. And I'm going to take you through a few examples. So the first type of business model we see at the bottom is what we call suppliers. So these are typically the service providers or hardware manufacturers that sell you stuff. And at the current moment, these are the actors that are setting the narrative on digital transformation. And you want to think about it twice, because their incentive is really to sell you things. We, as PwC and other consultants, are part of that group. They set the narrative. In the very short term, they're probably the ones that are making money out of digital transformation because they are selling you stuff. On the long run, these suppliers, they are going to be commoditized. And what you want is to make sure that you don't end up in that quadrant. The second type of actors we see, which is in the bottom corner here, are what we call modular products. And Kian, in a few minutes, will explain to you what his company does. But basically, these are platforms which you can use almost as white labels. A good example is basically payment companies, which don't necessarily have a direct link to the client and customers, but which you can embed in your offering and are platforms that you can rely upon. And these modular product business models, they've got to be very, very innovative because in the long run, they are going to be commoditized as well. If you move to the business models at the top, what you see are business models where there's a high reliance on customer intimacy. And with customer intimacy comes a need for data. It comes a need for interactions. And what I've put in there are a few examples. They're not pretending that these are the best examples or the only ones. They're just trying to explain what we are doing with here. The first one is multi-channel businesses. Here, basically, the essence are business models where you build such a customer intimacy that you are able to predict the customer behavior, you're able to adjust your product offering accordingly, bundling, unbundling, upselling, cross-selling, in such a way that you hit the right price point at every time. And here we see a number of innovations happening. We see that, for instance, EasyJet has invested heavily on data analytics, and their focus is really about finding the right price point and the right moment to actually offer an upsell, a cross-sell to a particular customer. Another example is United. They've gone down a slightly different track where they're saying, listen, we need to build customer intimacy and we need to build customer relationship. And they've equipped their flight attendants with iPads. And basically, they've set a goal that based on the insight they get from the iPad, they are tasked to go and speak to clients. Can you believe this? Speak to clients. The last part of the quadrant, which is called ecosystem drivers, are really those actors which are setting the big game changers. Because if you work in the multi-channel business, you can build a pretty good comparative advantage, but it is going to be very short-lived. Why? Because over time, it's easy to copy. And the innovation you can have today, you can be sure that if it's a good one, in 12 months' time, others will have copied it. Whilst in the quadrant on the top right, what you see are ecosystems. And when I say ecosystems, I'm not just talking about the airline ecosystem, I'm talking about any ecosystem, and what we see is that some of these boundaries are being blurred. I'll give you an example around identity management. Today, the company or the organization or the alliances that manage to know their client and to sort of own the identity and can hook any information to this identity will be able to actually become a platform and potentially disintermediate those organizations that are either in the multi-channel business or in the supplier. So what we see is that there are lots of movements. I've put an example in the middle to say that organizations don't necessarily fit in one box or another. We see a range of things being done by a range of actors, and it's a very dynamic aspect. So what will be interesting in the panel in a minute will be to see how organizations actually see this type of portfolio of positioning and the type of products and capabilities that are in there. One of the things I wanted to flag for the discussion was also some challenges and some key requirements, because I hope that you see that there are good opportunities for you, but essentially there are 4 things to master. I've talked about data and the fact that the higher you are in the business model chain, the more hungry for data you will be. The more you will need to collect, the more you will need to process, and the more you will need to bring insights. With that comes a level of intimacy with your customer and an ability to personalize the offering, the experience, and what you offer to them. But I just want to end on a sobering note, because with that comes tremendous responsibility. We see huge data leakage. We see important, notably in Europe, data protection regulations being enacted, which, if you breach, will really impact your bottom line because the fines are proportionate to your revenue. And linked to that, the other element, and it was quite striking for me to listen to the discussions this morning, is you need to master the basics. You still have massive IT outages. You still have pretty strong disconnect between different parts of your operations. You still have long delays and people missing their planes and connections. So all that is really good on paper, but if you don't master the basics, it is going to be challenging to move into these business models. And I see that time is running short. We also see that there's a number of paradoxes that you need to deal with. The first one is that notion that, yeah, it's very high-tech, it's very technology-driven, when actually it's a lot about cultural change. We asked some questions to CEOs in our annual survey about what are their key concerns. Number 4 came skills. Number 5 came data protection and cyber. So you see that it's a world of opportunities, but we did come some challenges. The second element I would stress is that notion of agility. I think it's this morning someone was mentioning the fact that we still have massive IT complexity, decades-old IT systems. It takes years to become agile. So how do organizations actually manage that? I see that my time is running out. Just to flag as well the notion of failure. You're not an industry that likes to hear failure, because for you, failure means death. At the same time, in the world that we're talking about, you need to try. You need to test, you need to fail, and in a way, those organizations that learn to fail in a safe way will be the ones that actually can tap into that potential and can actually manage this type of search for new business models. I'll pause here, and I will look forward to your questions during the panel.
Thank you, Antoine. Just have a seat here and just wait for the next one. Thank you very much for this. Our next speaker is Kian Gould. He's a founder and CEO of AOA. He's been driving digital transformation in the travel retail for many years worldwide, so hopefully he will inspire us. So it's good examples. A big round of applause for Kian, please.
Hello, I'm going to cover a lot of ground today in those 14 minutes that I have, so make sure you pay attention. A lot of data coming. What I want to talk about today is the future of travel retail and how it is evolving to be a lot more about data than it is about what kind of products you can carry on a plane or you can sell to your passengers. Very briefly, who is AOE? We are currently the leading travel retail digitalization company. You've probably seen some of the stuff we've done at Heathrow, Frankfurt Airport, stuff we're doing with Singapore Airlines and so on. But that's all on us. We basically focus on digitalizing all of the non-aviation revenues that airlines and airports can sell to their customers. Now, let's have a look at global travel retail and if it is at danger of being digitally disrupted or digitally evolved. Yesterday's travel retail shopping, both in airports but also at airlines in the plane, was banking 100% on impulse purchasing, that people see a product in a catalog, in a store, and they decide to buy it on the spot. And a lot of this business that is a $67 billion business in the world was based on the fact that people believed that that's the reality. However, what we're seeing is that customer behavior is changing significantly around the world when it comes to shopping and deciding what products to buy. We now have more mobile devices in the world than toothbrushes, which is definitely a hygiene issue, but it's not an issue in regards to communicating with your passengers through digital means. The average European now spends close to 4 hours on their mobile phone, and thanks to the newest iOS upgrade, you get reminded of that every week, which I love. Last week I was at 5.5 hours, so I think I have to cut down a little bit. 25% of all e-commerce sales in the world are now, in the US, are now coming from mobile devices. In China, that percentage is already at 75%. So pretty much all of e-commerce happens on mobile devices. When we're looking at this new reality, there is a big danger to this entire travel retail space and also the aviation space, which in part still relies on high EBITDA margins from selling on board and doing e-commerce to its passengers, that passengers will increasingly decline to buy from an airport or an airline. And we can already see those trends quite significantly when we're looking at this space and map it actually to the traffic figures that we're seeing. And the ones that have been hit the hardest by this change in passenger behavior have been the airlines, with 11% CAGR, basically in a decline of travel retail sales over a period of 5 years. So this might be the reason why some airlines have already given up on this business model altogether and decided that they will no longer sell any retail products. However, the big question is if that's really the right decision when that average passenger that spends only about $8 while traveling spends $540 online and more than $6,000 in retail a year, and we as the aviation community know much more about these passengers than most e-commerce providers in the world actually do. So this opens a lot of possibility. One of the things that has really changed in the way that passengers decide what to shop and if to shop is that now 81% of all purchases are planned in advance versus that illusion that mostly it's bought on impulse. And of course, the result of that is that people do their research digitally and online before purchasing something, and they react much more to digital impulses than to physical impulses when deciding what products to buy. Some of the data from Mindset underlines that 34% of all passengers are actually looking for duty-free shopping possibilities before traveling. 40% would like to do the shopping before flying. 53% make the decision to buy duty-free before traveling, and so on. The percentages of passengers using their mobile devices to book, using their mobile devices to check in, all of this is growing exponentially, and of course that shows what we are occupied with when we're traveling. It's our mobile devices and not what's around us, and the airlines are still far from really capitalizing on the possibilities that creates. One of the most exciting pieces of research is actually that Gartner has found in a study this year that today 79% of all of our purchasing decisions are actually created or influenced by an online search at one stage or another. That is just incredible, because we used to think that we get mainly influenced by billboards or other people having products or seeing products somewhere in stores, but the reality is we have become completely internet addicted people. So the problem is consumers want to shop digitally, but airlines are still trying to sell from a cart. Some of them anyway. So maybe to give you a little bit of an idea of how we have tackled this at a big airport, global hub like Heathrow, I brought a little video for you to see what kind of potential lies in this digital engagement.
Heathrow Airport has a long-term vision to deliver a seamless digital retail experience for its passengers, from home, en route to the airport, and once they arrive. It's one of the most complex challenges airports around the world face as they take on the threat of e-commerce whilst trying to benefit from the opportunities it presents. Heathrow's partnership with AOE is at the heart of building seamless end-to-end experiences for passengers. Underpinned by AOE's powerful omni-channel multi-merchant marketplace suite, OM3, the improved digital marketplace for the airport's 300-plus brands and retailers is accessed through its online store, Heathrow Boutique. It has already started to bridge the gap between retail and digital in a meaningful way. Heathrow isn't alone. Frankfurt, Auckland, and the first airlines have already started rolling out AOE's innovative solution. Since the highly successful launch of the updated Heathrow Boutique in March 2018, the airport plans to rapidly extend the product offer. Passengers are contacting the support team in the hundreds daily to ask about more products yet to be listed. This positive feedback is rapidly accelerating plans to increase the range to include 40 additional retailers by the end of the year. Much of the revenue is from high-end luxury, fashion, spirits, and consumer technology goods. Many of the most popular pre-orders are top-of-the-line Swiss watches, electronics, including Apple products, and DSLR cameras. Recent research clearly shows that the majority of travelers have already made the decision to buy, and have identified that getting their choice at the airport is a cost-efficient and convenient way to do so. They're using the platform to research and reserve luxury items. This emphasis on luxury goods is reflected in an average basket value of nearly 400 pounds, or $515 US, and growing. And that's about 5 times Heathrow's retail average. Heathrow Boutique is built on a multi-brand focus approach, so each brand can control their visuals on the site. Many premium brands, like Mont Blanc, have their own branded shop-in-shop that is simple and intuitive to navigate. Click Reserve, add your flight details, and in seconds, it's yours. And then pick it all up at the collection point. A wide range of payment options and fulfillment possibilities will be added in the next phases to drive prepayment that will significantly increase conversion and pickup rates. With excellent feedback from both the airport and customers and a very accelerated return of investment, it's just the first phase launch of a much broader digitalization program that is designed to grow Heathrow's digital revenues and contribute a significant portion of the airport's total commercial revenues. As Heathrow Airport's Chris Annan says, this is just the beginning.
So here's just a little example of how airports can use this new drive to digitalization in terms of commercial revenues. And of course, a lot of that also applies to airlines, although the airlines are typically in an even better position to obviously communicate to those passengers pre-flight than the airport is, which doesn't naturally own that passenger data. And nowadays, it's all about that data to be able to do personalization, to do recommendations, and to actually sell to your passengers before they're traveling and not in that very constrained time while they are traveling. What's very interesting at Heathrow is that the way that online sales are happening now is actually almost the exact opposite of how they're happening in retail at the airport. 56% of the sales are high-end electronics, a lot is luxury watches, 24%, 9% is in luxury fashion, whereas at the airport typically most of the sales are the classic duty-free products. And this is also one of the explanations why a lot of airlines have noticed that a simple reserve and collect or a pre-ordering for their airline doesn't really work with the standard range of products that they offer in flight, which is the standard duty-free products, because the interest to pre-order those is relatively limited, where pre-ordering products that are much more rare, harder to get, and where the price advantages are higher, is much more interesting for the passenger, but much harder for the airline to carry in a cart if they don't know if they're going to deliver it. So pre-ordering versus in-flight delivery is a very key benefit of digitalization and e-commerce for airlines in that sector. Just to give you a little bit of an idea of what we've seen there is the top-selling item is actually a 35,000 euro watch on that e-commerce platform, and the top-selling brand is Bulgari. So it's very much different from what you would expect from the typical airport environment. So it's not surprising that many brands don't like to be sold like this anymore. Many of the premium brands have pulled out of being sold in flight and don't want to do it anymore. And the simple reason is that they don't feel that it gives a premium experience to their passengers. Whereas when you're doing pre-order, you know your customer, you deliver it to their seat at the very last minute, you can do a much more personalized service also. This changes completely. And one of the reasons why I'm here today is that a lot of what these airports are doing around the world and what these airlines are doing around the world relies on collaborating with each other in order to be able to really drive that passenger journey throughout the entire ecosystem, because no one can really provide all of the relevant touch points for a passenger. The airport has the infrastructure, but they don't have the data naturally. The airlines have the data, but they don't have access to the product naturally. And the brands don't have access to the passenger directly. So really this, what we call the quaternity of travel retail, is what can drive this forward significantly. You might have seen that Frankfurt Airport and Lufthansa have started a first such collaboration, and there are more and more airports and airlines starting to work like that. And what we are currently doing with the biggest, currently the best airline in the world, Singapore Airlines, is really driving that to new extremes, you could say, and creating this kind of mobile-based passenger experience that is all about context, personalization. Depending on your loyalty status, certain products are recommended to you. You can buy at any point in the journey. We have a project called P60 where we will deliver to the seat up to 60 minutes before you actually depart. This is, of course, a huge logistical constraint, but the typical 3 days in advance pre-ordering is something that no one uses and no one cares about, and that's the only thing that is being offered currently by most airlines. And so it really becomes about real time, about context, and about the right product to the right passenger at the right time, with integrated payment possibilities, the choice to do home delivery if it's a bigger item. An airline like Singapore, for example, sells more wine fridges than wine. So, you know, home delivery becomes a completely different part of that picture as well. And it enables them to become not only an airline selling products, but actually a true e-commerce player. And I'm sure you've heard airlines like Ryanair say, we are a data company that happen to have airplanes in our parking lots. This is very much how airlines can use the access they have to their passengers in order to sell them services and products completely outside of the scope that they have so far been able to. And really drive that journey through offline, through in-flight, through mobile, through all of the omni-channels that are available. And really the goal is to create this kind of first-class, seamless shopping experience at any time and during every stage of their travel. So digital won't replace physical travel retail, but we believe very strongly that it's where most of the future growth lies. And in 5 years' time, I believe there will be two kinds of airlines. There will be the ones that are embracing omni-channel e-commerce and building significant revenue streams from that. And there will be others that decide to use that data and collaborate with their hub airports and work on a commission model to actually drive sales at the airport. And either way is fine. But it is about this kind of digital drive to sell to the passengers the right product at the right time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kian. Please have a seat. I will also want to welcome our third panelist. He's Gabriel Perdiguero. He's the Chief Transformation Officer at Iberia. Please a round of applause for him. Please make sure to use slido.com. You can see it on the bottom with the hashtag WOCE18. Through any device, you can access there, throw in your questions. I will be seeing them on the iPad, and I will be able to ask our panelists. No, that's okay. I stay here. So let's start with our first panelist. First of all, thank you very much, the three of you, for joining today. In your case, Gabriel, since you didn't have the chance of having a presentation before, we heard Mr. Gallego talking a few minutes earlier about the Plan de Futuro, right? So Iberia has been going through that tough stage. I think he talked about survival, but now things are changing, right? And if I understand correctly, your position was created like a year ago. So how are we moving on into a new phase? How are things evolving? Could you please elaborate roles, responsibilities? What is the vision for you?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for inviting me this last minute invite, Juan. So first of all, let me just share what is transformation for me. So it's been all the time out of your comfort zone. Okay, I will give you an example that will help to set the expectations for the audience. I have two girls, nearly 8 years old and 6 years old. And very recently, 2 weeks ago, a new girl has joined the family. So that's going out of your comfort zone that I was previously. That's pretty much so. To set expectations, I've slept 2 or 3 hours in the last 2 weeks. So you will understand probably, many of you, what that means. So answering your question. So yes, I've been in this role for more or less 1 year as a chief transformation officer. Previously of that, I was leading the Plan de Futuro, but from a quite different angle that you will get the point very, very easily. I was the group controller, so I was running the Plan de Futuro pure from a financial and performance point of view, because we were in a quite bad situation. I joined Iberia in 2014. As probably Luis said, we were losing almost 1 million a day. My wife asked me, "Are you serious? Are you going to change your to join Iberia?" I said, "Yes, this is definitely the project of my life." And we were running this first phase from a pure financial and performance point of view to survive. Last year we were nearly 400 million operating profit. So we are happy what I've achieved, but we are only halfway. And for doing this next step of the transformation, we consider that we have to go to the excellence. Why we have created this as a role in the Iberia Management Committee? Because an airline, I think, it's organized in silos. Very common. There is operations, commercial, human resources. Even if you have internally your MRO, your handling, they are running the businesses in silos. And I usually see finance saying, okay, we are going to, in many airlines, and we are going to drive the transformation because it's about performance, financial performance. I can see HR saying, okay, no, we are going to run the transformation because it's all about people. I can see commercial, no, we are going to run. So I think, or we live in Iberia, that we have to break the silos across all these areas. Absolutely. And this is why we have created this as a permanent role in our management committee.
Do you think this is a general trend? Do you see other airlines building such positions? Do you have like peers or group of people that have similar responsibilities as yours across the board?
So to be honest, not many. I can see that this is a trend in other industries. Definitely, I would say that at least in the Spanish market, banking, they are a little bit ahead of the game in this case. They have chief data officers or transformation officers or wherever. In our case, I have the remit of new organization because probably we will expand later on. But this is, as my colleague said, this is all around culture and change, people mindset. I have organization, IT, data, incremental innovation, and disruption.
All right. Thank you very much. This is a first question around, often change is perceived as a negative thing from an employee perspective. So you want to modernize things and people perceive it, oh, look, they give us an iPad. Oh, probably they're going to fire one of us because we're going to be more efficient kind of position, right? So how do you go about that? How do you change people from being reactionary to digital transformation, not necessarily digital, but transformation, or tagging along and being part of the movement? Any one of you?
I can go. Okay. So first of all, when we started our transformation, this next phase for excellence, what we said is, okay, we are not going to leave anyone behind. Okay, I used that quote very recently. It's like the U.S. Marines quote. Okay, we are not going to leave anyone behind. That first of all, you tell that to people. Okay, we rely on all of you to deliver this. The point that the digitalization is going to help them in their lives. So we have created a customer experience area, but as well the employee experience area. Okay. So many times companies have a big pitfall. So we put in front of our customers great devices, a lot of information, nice features, but we don't do the same with our people. And this it happens every day that our customers know more around disruptions or even the aircraft or whatever that their own employees.
I often hear that like, hey, my bag is not on the plane.
And the crew do not anything.
So building on the customer side, so we always talk about millennials and young people, but everybody, even though you're old, you want to have real-time information. You want to have zero friction. You want things now. You want things to be working, right? So how do we cope with that, right? So we have a very complex industry. We did in the introduction. There's a lot of players, a lot of things going on. How can we evolve to meet the expectations of this never satisfied customer?
I think in general, millennials have very little tolerance for excuses why things are not working. And a lot of the reasons why technologically things are not working in the aviation space is because of legacy systems, lack of integration, lack of transformation into more modern architectures and so on. And I mean, we heard that example today. If I'm flying between two airlines owned by the same group, why can't I use the boarding pass in the same app? Yeah. You know, these are like examples that are very simple, and for a customer, very difficult to understand. Why doesn't this work? Similarly, I ask myself constantly, why does the app of my home carrier constantly crash when I'm trying to check in? Why does this happen? Why does that happen? So there's a lot of frustration with that, and there's very little understanding, or tolerance really. That why should I accept that as a passenger?
Absolutely, but I'm hearing different things. So is it really because of the technology, or is it because of the lack of, let's say, trust? So why would what is the incentive for me to give you access? You don't have another option, right? So which is it? Technology, business model, both?
Yeah, I mean, for most of today's passengers, it's just about, they want to get from A to B as seamlessly as possible. And for them, it's like anything that kind of hinders that seamless and easy to use experience.
I understand. But I suppose in your example, you say we need to have more collaboration between airlines and airports. Now, I suppose technologically you can do very, very fancy interfaces, but if I'm opening up my database to you and I'm not getting any incentive for that, like why would I do it? Even though it's great for the passenger. This is so technology is here, right? So isn't it more a problem of business trust? Or
If I may elaborate a bit on that, what we saw in my short presentation was these two models where you have ecosystem setters and the providers. This is quite dynamic. It's in the making. If as an organization you're not confident where you're going to end up in the food chain, you're less likely to engage. You're very much less likely to engage. And what we see is that there's probably excellent collaboration between acknowledged suppliers and the airlines, between airlines and across the industry, given the sort of lack of clarity and the sort of fight for survival that we see is coming. Everybody's sort of finding their feet, and it's probably that the incentives are not adequate at the moment.
Okay. So you mentioned systems. I kind of agree. We said in IATA we had this industry systems architect that used to say that we are always building new things that are patches and they need to be retrocompatible with the old world that is based on mainframe and it's 60 years old. So he used to refer to that we're just putting lipstick on the pig. Do you agree?
To some extent, yes, and of course it's a risk for the traditional carriers that they have a significant disadvantage to new and upcoming low-cost carriers who build their IT internally, who build things in a greenfield approach, and so some of them can transform and innovate much faster than the traditional carriers. So in that regard, it definitely has a risk of slowing down progress and causing a risk to the business model.
Okay.
If I can add on that, we in Iberia, so we identified this risk 2 years or 2 years and a half ago. So to be in a position that we are going to move fast, to be in the ecosystem, to work very actively in open innovation, incorporate more than 20 startups a year, that is our KPI, to work with many suppliers, many partners. We started what we call zero-based approach project. We ask every single business owner, okay, if you were launching an airline from scratch, how your processes, how your processes, systems will look like, okay?
Sure.
We have invested a reasonable amount of money for us in doing that, so we have completely changed our backend, and we are building over that. So we are in a very nice position to expose our processes to our customers and employees, and we are in that way.
Okay.
Right now.
So there is a cost and there is a risk, right? Which
there's always risks in everything.
Our company, our industry is very known by risk aversion. One, just to think about the future. So we're seeing a number of projects that are looking into automation, right? Some of them are under-the-wing automation, so just to make the dollies and things like that. Some others are even going beyond, self-piloted aircraft, things like that. How far are we? Okay, I will do it. So with our strategy, we are not putting too much effort in the disruptive innovation, what the McKinsey model calls Horizon 3, okay? Because we have to tackle the short term. But I think it's not too much far away. So we were sponsoring a South Summit in Madrid, a big startup event in the south of Europe. And we were having a conversation with some guys that are building or are aiming to build 2 kilometers of Hyperloop in Valencia in 2 years.
So I think that that can disrupt the short haul model from the airlines. So we are already looking at how that can impact our business model.
So you're keeping an eye.
It's only yes, keep an eye and look for opportunities. But it's only two years ago. In 2 years we are going to have that in Spain, in Valencia actually.
Okay, just continue with my projection. So imagine in the future the aircraft fly by themselves. Then you need to have control of your data, because if you don't have control of your data, then who is flying the aircraft? So how do we go about that today? Are we conscious of the value of data, or are we just opening it up to third parties and outsourcing and just considering that this is not a today problem?
Well, I think generally everyone is extremely protective of their data, which is understandable to some extent, but it also keeps a lot of seamlessness and innovation away. So you know, very simple things like with my Google ID, I can do almost anything. I can log in onto almost any website in the world, but you know, I still need an account with every single airline I fly with. So that's just
there is
one simple
a federation
example.
of identities, for instance, right?
Yeah.
But let's see what happened early this year with Facebook, right? So they had to go in front of the US Senate and the European Commission to do a mea culpa, because with great power or great data comes great responsibility, right?
But I see, if I may contribute to that, I think this is where airlines have an advantage, if you ask me. If you look at these online business models, data privacy isn't really their main concern, because their business model is built around exactly the opposite. Airlines have a reputation for reliability. They have a reputation for caring about their customers. And I think if you're trying to position yourself in the ecosystem, that's really the value proposition I would bring. But again, what capabilities do you need to actually protect data?
Absolutely.
Make sure that you abide by jurisdiction. We have GDPR in Europe. I think it's a fantastic asset, notably for European companies, because it's your DNA. You know how to do that. American companies and online companies, they probably have a bit more way to go to actually understand the fundamental shift in approaching customer data.
So there is a tension here between just exposing a lot of data or just restricting it, and the more we go, passengers need to expose a lot of data to get a better service across the board. But reversely, to your point, you're more and more conscious of that and you're restricting it. So
I think
something's got to go.
It comes down to choice, and this is what GDPR is all about. You know, I want to be able to have a single ID across everything, but I want to choose who gets access to that ID. That's what it's about.
Absolutely.
But we don't have the foundation yet to actually have a single identity that we can access across different providers and ecosystem players.
I think building on that, I think you are totally right. I think the customer has the right to opt in. Okay, so for me it's an opportunity. GDPR is a tremendous opportunity to provide the customer. Okay, do you opt in to this type of service or whatever? And I think there are technologies, and just look as in the short term, that are going to help us to release that pain of many customers that want to use one single ID to join many places.
All right. Just in the interest of time, just the last one. So you've been, as a consultant, been exposed to a number of industries, a number of use cases, and yourself, you've seen a very interesting thing that you've been pushing with different realities and different airlines and airports. And in your case, you've been through the entire journey. What would be your recommendations to the audience on what mistakes would you have avoided, or what would you have liked to know before you embark yourself into this transformation of and digital or not? To your point.
Go ahead.
So for me, I think I'm come back to my first quote is that do not leave anyone behind. So there were, when we decided to launch this, there were basically many models. You have to look for your own. There is not anyone that, sorry about that, right? But any consultant that can tell you, okay, this is the model that has applied to you. Indeed, the transformation, maybe that works in the past, but not in this moment, because there is a very cultural portion on this. Okay, so we decided you have two ways. Build a Chinese walls between the legacy and the new. Okay, and then all the new guys, resources, money is all what is good is on the new. And then the legacy is bad. Okay, that's one way. We do not believe in that. So we have created on a small transformation team with digital ambassadors. So they spread the message, they spread that change is good. So we are starting to get traction of all the organization. That's where the powerful message is.
So emphasis on cultural change, all right? In your case,
I think
Kian?
digitalization has a lot to do with readiness for innovation also, and it's not enough for airlines to start an innovation lab, put guys in flip-flops in there and hope that they will bring a revolution to the airline. And unfortunately, a lot of them are doing that, and the outcome of these innovation labs is very minuscule. The reality is that innovation needs to be at the core of the business, and that is, of course, much, much harder to achieve than outsourcing it. So I think it is somewhat of an oxymoron, but there is a general not built here syndrome across the airlines, that they're trying to do things within the ecosystem and are not open enough to outside players and outside providers. On the other hand, if you outsource everything, of course you lose traction, control, and the ability to innovate also. I always like to say innovation is not a configuration option. So you need to really try to build innovation at the core and not just buy stuff and
Excellent. Thank you very much. And just to close,
And for me,
Juan?
it's really the art of combining three choices. The first one around where do you want to play,
Okay.
which quadrant. Second choice around what capabilities do you actually need to actually be able to play the game you want to play. And it's one thing to be able to plan and fill containers with people reliably transported from point A to point B. It's another capability to be able to actually become a retailer. And the last choice relating to that is about how and who to partner with.
Absolutely.
And I think this
Very
is
key.
a critical skill.
Very key. So thank you very much for your time. Please, thank you. A big round of applause for our panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, adelante, adelante.